Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Today, October 2nd, there's been an interesting release of information in the run-up to the new book on Chris Watt, Letters from Christopher. And essentially what we get through these letters and through this information, through this preview that's published in the media, is a third confession, if you can believe that. What we're going to do is go through some details from the letters and then do a little bit of analysis. Just want to be very clear that I'm not going to give the letters the full True Crime Rocket Science treatment here. At this point, we're simply going to go through it, review it, and then do a little bit of preliminary analysis. Okay, it's not going to be a detailed analysis, just going to be a little bit of highlighting certain aspects. Okay, so if we look at the date of the letter that's actually sent to Cadle, it's dated April 23rd, 2019, and I believe that once this letter was sent, she probably felt that she had the material for a book. I think that this sort of formed the crux of the decision to be able to publish the book. Although what's interesting is in the actual letter, Watts mentions whether you would want this in the book. So obviously they discussed it before then. But I think until this letter came out on April 23rd, I don't think there was really much substance to what he'd in terms of the crime. I don't think there had been much substance to that. It's quite interesting that this was published sort of the end of April, which is essentially 5 months ago. So it's hard to believe that this book was put together when the letters were still being written towards the end of April. So that's just something to bear in mind. So when we go to the basis of the third confession, we see that he claims that the smothering of his children in their beds was botched, and that while murdering Shan'ann, after poisoning her with Oxycodone, the children came back to life, and that this was a scenario which angered him. In this version, Watts murdered or attempted to murder his daughters while Shan'ann was asleep in his bed. So in other words, this first attempted murder took place when Shan'ann was home, while she was sleeping, while she was in bed. I'm going to start off by reading the excerpt of the letter dated April 23rd, 2019. Dear Shan'ann, hello again. I hope you are doing well. It has been awesome talking with you on the phone, but I know the 15-minute time frame is a pain. Sometimes I can get right back on the phone, but right now there are other inmates that like to be on the phone as much as I do, so I respect their time as well. How's your dad doing? I've been praying on that every day. Yes, that petition really blew my mind, that people really want to make me suffer like that. Even if they did take my pictures, they can't take my memories. An inmate from another institution wrote me about that subject and said, if they take your pictures, they would need to take the pictures from the other 500 to 600 people that have their family pictures up on their cell convicted of the same act. The next paragraph. Do I feel like I should be incarcerated? For the act I committed, I most definitely think so. Do I imagine myself ever doing anything like this or be a danger to society? I most definitely think not, in all caps, exclamation mark. If I were ever to be released, I know I would go straight to a ministry and start going to jails, prisons, and help inmates. If God led me to be ordained, I would go that route as well, possibly even be a chaplain. Maybe the laws will change one day. My attorney team could see I was different and knew that this was a one-time occurrence for me. They told me that in Europe the law is I would serve 20 years or so for homicide, and in California after 25 years of imprisonment on a life sentence you can be released if you've had good behavior. So there's hope for everyone to live outside prison walls. I know physically I'm behind these walls, but my spirit is free, in all caps, with Christ, exclamation mark. If God keeps putting it on your heart that there's more to the story than what I told the FBI has, you're correct. I don't like saying stuff like that over the phone because I'm never certain when they screen my calls. I know I already told you the vision I had before August 13th, when I was lying in bed and all the lights were on in the loft and downstairs and I felt so alone. That's exactly what happened April 14th when I was lying in bed. Now presumably the April 14th is 9 days before this letter was written. Okay, going back to the letter, I don't know if you want this in the book or if God does, but here are the things I left out. Now, it's not clear whether he means things that he's left out in previous letters to her or things that he's left out in what he said to other people, the interrogators, or whether it's sort of a general thing, well, that I've left this out so far. In any event, he then numbers 3 aspects, and this is basically probably halfway through the letter. So the first half of the letter is talking about, should he be incarcerated and what he would do with his life. The second half is talking about the 3 aspects to the crime that is left out until now. And so let's go through them. Number 1, August 12th, when I finished putting the girls to bed, I walked away and said, that's the last time I'm going to be tucking my babies in. I knew what was going to happen the day before. That would be August 11th, which would be Saturday. And I did nothing to stop it. I was numb to the entire world. I'd literally taken my kids to a birthday party, played with water balloons, had an amazing time, sang songs all the way home, gave them a bath, a shower, ate dinner, read bedtime stories and sang bedtime songs, and still nothing registered. 2 exclamation marks. When Shan'ann had to be somewhere, I always enjoyed taking the girls places or playing outside because it was our opportunity to bond, and still the night before I couldn't stop myself from what I knew would occur the next morning. There's quite a lot to say about that, but what does immediately stand out is where Watts talks about, that's the last time I'm going to be tucking my babies in. That's the same thing he said during the Sermon on the Porch, that he wouldn't be tucking his babies in that night and so on. Okay, so now we get to point number 2. August 13th, morning of, I went to the girls' room first before Shan'ann and I had our argument. So what he's actually saying is August 13th, after 1:48 in the morning, he went to the girls' room when Shan'ann was presumably sleeping. I went to Bella's room, then Cece's room, and used a pillow from their bed to kill them. And from this description, it sounds like he's talking about that he went to Bella's room first. In any event, getting back to the letter, he says that's why the cause of death was smothering. After I left Cece's room, then I climbed back in bed with Shan'ann and our argument ensued. So it's quite interesting, just this aspect is in the first confession he mentioned killing Cece first, and in the second confession he also mentioned killing Cece first. In this version, he's certainly in point number 2, he goes to Bella's room first, then Cece's room. So that's an interesting switcheroo over there. And then he gets into bed with Shan'ann and they continue arguing. He says after Shan'ann had passed, so he doesn't actually describe the murder of Shan'ann at all. he says, after Shan'ann had passed, Bella and Cece woke back up. He says, I'm not sure how they woke back up, but they did. Bella's eyes were bruised and both girls looked like they had been through trauma. That made the act that much worse, knowing I went to their rooms first and knowing I still took their lives at the location of the batteries. Yeah, I'm just going to quickly comment on this aspect. I don't believe that this is true at all. And I think the word trauma is quite an artificial word. It's not a word that I think Watts would normally use. So the fact that he said both girls looked like they had been through trauma, it just doesn't ring true to me at all, just the way that he explains that. There's a lot more to say about that. I'm not going to deal with it now, but another aspect is that he's arguing with Shan'ann while the children are supposedly not dead, but kind of not sleeping either, but something in between. So sort of arguing with them, and then he uses the word woke back up. Woke back up, not sort of, came back to life or something. He uses the term woke back up twice. He says Bella and Cece woke back up. I'm not sure how they woke back up, but they did. I'm really going to keep this very short, but I think that this little piece here has got to do with Watts being aware of the shadows on the driveway. I think he is sort of aware of that's kind of a finish line, and so he's now inventing certain aspects which are just as unlikely. But anyway, in this scenario, the children now are running around. They've been hurt, they've been injured. Their father's attempted to murder them, and they are sort of running around, and that's fine. He's just murdered their mother, but it's fine that they sort of can run around. Again, I'm not going to go into the analysis too deeply here. If we go to the next point, 3, the reason the medical examiner found oxycodone in Shan'ann's system is because I gave it to her. I thought it would be easier to be with Nicole if Shan'ann wasn't pregnant. And so in this little description, he's basically admitting that he poisoned Shan'ann with oxycodone. He doesn't describe how or when. And what's really interesting here is he's saying something that seems to be a reference of forensic fact and legal fact, that the medical examiner found oxycodone in Shan'ann's system. I don't think that's true. I don't think the medical examiner, as far as we know, did find that in her system. As far as I know, those HIPPA, I'm not quite sure what they are, but those health legislation, I think one can refer to them as HIPAA laws. HIPAA, the HIPAA Act, that precluded the public from gaining access to some of the information around Shan'ann, and so that might have been withheld from the public and sort of legally withheld. So we may be getting an insight here into what was in the autopsy that we don't know about, that other people do know about. And so it's really interesting that True Crime Rocket Science did actually mention the oxycodone in its earlier versions and saw it as a murder weapon. And this has now been confirmed based on this version here. But you've still got to be careful whether the oxycodone was used on Shan'ann and when. When was it used? But he does say, because I gave it to her, and he said, I thought it would be easier to be with Nicole if Shan'ann wasn't pregnant. This seems to be an indirect way of saying that he thinks that being with, that it was to bring about an abortion. I'm not sure whether he's saying here that he was using it to kill Shan'ann or whether to bring about the abortion. Sort of a very vague language that he doesn't commit to one by the other. But I do think just that statement is really interesting, is where he says, I thought it would be easier to be with Nicole if Shan'ann wasn't pregnant. And I think that speaks volumes. I think that is very, very true. Um, whether he wanted to murder Shan'ann or not, I think if you just think about this thing of, I wish Shan'ann wasn't pregnant. If Shan'ann wasn't pregnant, it would be easier to be with Nicole. So probably he did want to bring about an abortion, or bring about a situation that would terminate the pregnancy. I have posted stuff related to that on Crime Rocket, but anyway, let's just finish the letter. He says, I don't know if this was a spiritual visit, but I had a dream Cece was dancing next to the chair in my cell. When she was dancing, all of my folders on the chair started moving, and I thought she was in trouble. So I said, watch out, get away, watch out. Then I woke up. I'm hoping she comes back. I hope everyone comes to visit me. And I think this is a reference to his wife and children. I'm trying to see if I can clear my head better before I go to sleep to help. I think that's a typo there where he says, I'm trying to see if I can clear my head better before I go to sleep to help. I think what he means to say there is before I go to seek help. I think that means psychological help or something like that. So it sounds like Watts is having dreams or nightmares, or is imagining himself seeing ghosts or something. And he is seeking succor in religion and in the spiritual. And then he refers to, in his last paragraph of that, I like that John 10 verse 10 passage you sent. I wish I could have had an open ear to hear the Lord calling me back in June, July, August. If we run after sin, we won't hear our shepherd calling us. I couldn't discern between the good spirits and the evil spirits, and that eventually lodged me in a deep pit I couldn't climb back out of. Take care and God bless, ! Chris. Okay, I'm going to wrap up over there. There is more content to look at. There are more letters that have been reproduced. I'm not going to take it any further than that, but I think, I think there's what's interesting is I certainly wouldn't take the entirety of what Watts is saying as gospel. I don't think we should do that with the first confession, the second, or this one. I think we should treat everything he says almost the same way that we treat the Sermon on the Porch, which is to say, most of it is garbage, most of it is him being a silver fox, most of it is him slipping out of accountability, but some of it is true. There are aspects that resonate. Most of it, I would say, isn't true, but what is interesting is the words that he uses and the statements that he does make. And so what's also very interesting, and it takes a skilled lie detector and true crime rocket scientist to discern this, is to look at statements he makes that aren't true, statements he makes that aren't factually true, but that are nevertheless true in spirit. And what I mean by that is that they are true in terms of his situation. And I referenced one of those where I said where I just emphasized where Watt said, I thought it would be easier to be with Nicole if Shan'ann wasn't pregnant. And that makes complete sense. But the context in which he's saying it is less certain and certainly more questionable. So I hope you've enjoyed this reaction to the letters. If there are any questions, please leave them in the comments. Also subscribe to this channel. Click on the bell to receive indications of new videos. And also please like this video if you've enjoyed the coverage. There is a lot more to address. We will look at some of the other content in some of the other letters. But for now we're going to leave it at that. I will be analyzing in detail this sort of thing in Silver Fox, a book that I'm bringing out in November. So that's why I don't want to sort of push aside or what's the word, crowd out what's going to be analyzed in that narrative in the analysis on YouTube. So yeah, I'm just doing a very light look at some of the stuff, but there is a lot of psychological artifacts and a lot of things that we can start knitting together. So I'm actually looking forward to dealing with that, but for now let's leave it at that.